Well, today we're going to start turning the doorstop. It'll be the first actual project where you'll take what you've learned so far this semester and put it into practice. I've already turned the cylinder and smoothed it with the skew, as you saw in the last video on the cylinder. We won't repeat those steps. If you're wondering how it's done, then you can just refer back to the turning a cylinder video and how to find the center. We have a much longer blank than we actually need. We need 7.5 inches for the doorstop, and we're starting with 9 inches. So we're going to mark a 3/4 inch line on each side, and we'll turn that the same way we've done in the past to mark it. And again, this is just to establish the actual length we're going to use, and the other portions is waste. Now, we will take the parting tool and we're going to part down 7/8 of an inch. That'll give us a definition of the piece that we're trying to cut out of this, which is the doorstop. Now, using a parting tool is kind of like using a saw. You have to know which side of the line to put the tool on. Now, since we need 7.5 inches, and that's our inside dimension, from line to line should be 7.5 inches. Now, that means that we need to put the parting tool on the outside of those lines. So we're going to cut our groove on the outside of the line. There are times when you cut to the inside of the line. There's times when you center on the line. We used 2 of those when we turned the beads and coves. So you always have to be sure which side of the line you're going to put your tool. Now, we're going to just go ahead and take that in from the outside of the line. We're going in 5/8 of an inch, so it's going to be a fairly deep cut. And that's going to be about right. I'm not going to actually measure it, because all we've done is define the 7.5 inches that we need. All of this is going to be cut off eventually anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You wouldn't want to turn it really thin, because then you wouldn't have enough support and this middle could move. So our next step is to actually take a look at the book and lay that out. We need What I do now is actually mark out the length for the doorstop. According to the plans, it needs to be at 5 inches. So we put our mark at 5 inches. Now this is going to separate the doorstop portion from the handle portion. Now, according to the plans, I need to turn this handle down to 1.25 inches in diameter. This part is finished. We won't be touching this part at all. It should be roughly inch. It's about 1.5 inches. No, it can't be. That can't be right. This thing is off. Now it makes more sense. Now this is a little bit over 1.75 inches, but that's going to be all right. We're going to turn this down to 1.5 inches with the parting tool. And again, you have to be certain that you're on the right side. Since I need the full 5 inches in the doorstop, I'm going to be on the right-hand side of the line. And we're starting at about 1.75 inches. We want to go down to 1.25 inches. So we're removing a 1/2 inch of material, and we need about a 1/4 of an inch is what we're looking for. So I need a little bit more. Right there, that should be about right. Okay, that's just a little bit over 1.5 inches. So we need to do a little bit more to get to our 1.25 inches. That's 1.3 inches, so we still have just a little bit more to go. So now, we need to remove all of this material down to 1.25 inches. Now, we've got what we want on this side, but we also need one on this side. So, we're going to use the parting tool. We'll get one final measurement on here, and that's at 21/64. So we just need to turn this down to the same diameter. And then we'll measure that. And that is 13/32, which would be a little 25. So we need to go down to 21/64. So we've got a little bit more to go. And we're just right at it. So now I know how high it is on this side, and our diameters have been reduced in 2 places. So now all I have to do is remove the material between the 2 lands. And then I'll have another cylinder over here at a smaller diameter. Now the bowl gouge is a good tool to do that with. And again, the bowl gouge has a bevel, and you need to ride the bevel. If the tool has a bevel, you generally need to ride the bevel. So rather than being straight in perpendicular to the tool rest, I'm going to be over here. I'm going to have the flute at about a 45-degree angle. The more you open the flute, the more aggressive the cut. The more you close the flute, the less aggressive the cut. And a good medium is about 45 degrees. So, now you've probably noticed that I've got that index finger in that finger groove, and that index finger doesn't move. The tool goes on top, and I'm using the index finger to set my depth of cut. Now, you've probably noticed that my tool is now pretty close to perpendicular. And I told you earlier, don't do that. But the reason I can get away with it is because I'm actually still riding the bevel. If we can get the camera down to the side and look in from this way, when I drop the handle, I'm still riding the bevel, even though I'm actually perpendicular to the tool rest. I need to get that way because I can't touch this shoulder. I need that shoulder to stay sharp. So I can't touch that shoulder. And if I'm up here riding the bevel, that shoulder's in my way. So I drop the handle so I can still be on that bevel and make my cut. Now, we've got another cylinder that's pretty close to the same diameter all the way across. A lot of this is not going to matter because very little of this is going to remain. It'll be turned off as I actually turn the other elements of the handle. So we'll turn it off right now and take a look at what the next step is in the book. We're back. I've marked the next set of lines already. We marked one at 1/4 inch and then one at 1 1/8 inches. Now the 1 1/8 inches is going to be, that's going to separate the cove that's in this section from the ball that's on the end. Now when I designed this project, I wanted to incorporate all three elements that we've talked about so far. We have a cylinder, this portion will be a cove, this portion will be a bead. But in this case it'll be a complete ball because it will go on around and end at this end. So what I need now is to determine the diameter at the bottom of this cove. And what I need is 3/4 inch. So I need to put my tool on the the left hand side, and I need to go to a depth of 3/4 inch. All right, I'm about a 32nd of an inch above the 3/4 that I want. So that should be right at 3/4. Now, I have the diameter that I need. It's going to locate the bottom of the cove, and it's going to also locate where the ball is going to be formed. So now we want to do, we'll turn the cove. And to do that, we'll go back to the bow gouge. I want to keep the shoulder here sharp. And I need a good curve that leads into this. And I'm not going to start on the line because I'm going to do this in multiple passes. So, and again, you see I'm dropping the handle, so I'm on the bevel. And by doing multiple passes and backing up each time, I can establish the curve that I want and then follow that curve as I go deeper and deeper. a little bit deeper than I wanted to. So I'm just going to come back with the parting tool and clean that up. Now, at this point, we can do a little bit of sanding on it. So now I've marked a center line for the bead. We've got the cove formed, and I'm going to leave that just yet, and we'll sand the whole thing at one time. Now, because I have the center line for my bead, I can go ahead and roll that bead the same way I did when I was showing you on the video on rolling beads. We'll take a spindle gouge, and we're not going to start on the line. We're going to start up because we're not going to do this in one pass. And I start with the flute open and the tool rest at a 45-degree angle, or the tool at a 45-degree angle to the tool rest. Now you notice that as I start rolling this, I get really close to this part. Now we don't really need that, that's waste. And you can just cut that out of your way. Anything that you don't need that's in your way, just cut it out. So we'll start again. I've got to roll the bead, close the flute, and swing the handle at the same time. Now that's about what I want. Now I'll turn this side. And it's done the same way. You start with the flute open, and as you close the flute, you swing the handle. The only way that I can stay on the bevel is by swinging my handle around. Now you notice I'm leaving the pencil line. If I take that pencil line out, I lose my reference. Now, I've got a pretty good bead. I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to take just that one little bit off right there. Now all I really need to do is reduce this diameter here so I can get more of that ball formed. We'll do that with the parting tool. That's about as small as I want to go and still be able to maintain the strength that I need. I'm a little bit close over here, so I'm going to take off some more of this. And I'm just going to continue to curve. And that's just about as far as I'm going to go with the tool. Once we get this sanded, I'll show you how to cut it off. To cut the waste away, and you finish it by hand. So I'm going to show you a few tricks on a piece of sandpaper. What I'm going to do is set it up on the bed of the lathe, hold it with one hand, and tear it with the other. Now, I'm going to fold this piece of sandpaper in a specific way. I'm going to fold it over in thirds. Now, the reason I want to fold it in thirds is because if I use it any other way, when I fold it, grit will go against grit. Now, here I've got grit on this side, I've got grit here, but there's just paper here, and there's just paper on the inside. So by folding it in thirds, I'm not putting grit against grit. And then when you're using it that way, you wind up wearing the sandpaper out by rubbing against itself before you get a chance to put it against the work. Now, when you're sanding, there's a couple of things that you need to do. You're going to reduce the RPM to about 800, and you're going to get the tool rest out of your way. If you don't, when you're sanding, and a lot of people like to sand on the bottom so they can see it, or they get over here like this. If while sanding, you get your finger in here between the work and the tool rest, that always ends badly. So you want to move that tool rest back out of your way so that when you're sanding, let me reduce that speed to about 800. Now I'm using 220 grit. If you turn smoothly with your tools, you can start with 220. You don't have to start with the 80 or the 120. Now, we just want to start shaping this ball and getting off all the tool marks and that pencil mark. Now I want to be real careful when I'm sanding back up here. If I'm not, I'll round this sharp edge, and I don't want to do that. So I want to be very careful when I'm sanding close to that shoulder that I don't inadvertently sand my square shoulder round. Now, to sand the actual shoulder, we'll open that sandpaper up, and we'll just use it this way. Now, that's all it takes to sand if you have been careful with your tools and not gouged out the wood and wind up with catches and tear out. So that's as much as we can work on the lathe. Now we'll take it off the lathe and we will cut here and here on a bandsaw. And then we'll do the rest of the sanding by hand. And then I'll show you how to actually shape the doorstop. We've turned our doorstop, and now we need to do the next step, which is to cut off the waste areas on the sides. Now, we've turned our doorstop, we have it completely turned. We now need to cut the waste off each end. Now, the best way to do that is on the bandsaw. Now, because this is round and it will roll, you've got to be very careful how you approach a bandsaw blade that's going up and down. They're just going down, actually. If you're not careful, it will grab this round part on the inside and it will begin to spin this thing. And this jerks it out of your hand. It can actually pull your hand into the blade and ruin your whole day. So you need to have some kind of support for this while you're cutting. So we're going to put it on a miter gauge, hold it firmly against the bed of the table saw and against the back of the miter gauge. Line it up, we don't want to cut this edge, but we want to be fairly close to it. And then we just turn the machine off, making sure you have your safety glasses on. Now, we'll turn it around and we'll do the same thing. Now, because this is round, if we cut that flat on the bottom, when we go to sand that off, there'll be a flat spot on the bottom of our ball. So what I want to do is leave a little extra on there. So when I sand it, I don't run out of material to get it round. And it'll be the same thing. I'm going to hold it against the miter gauge, line it up, and leave that little bit of extra material. And cut it off. Okay. We have our piece cut off on the bandsaw, and now we need to cut the angles. There's 2 cuts that will be made on this to form the doorstop, to make the wedge. One is going to be straight, the other is going to be angled. We'll make the first cut straight. And what we really want to do with this is get one flat edge that we can put against the other side of this jig to cut the angle. So all we're going to do is set up the jig first. This is already sized to where I want it just short of that blade. So when it goes through there, it will miss the blade, but not by much. And we'll clamp it in place. Now, the doorstop will go in here and it will be held by the clamp. And now I don't have to touch that. It's going to be held securely. I can push it this way safely and make this cut. Now, so all I'm going to do now is turn this on and make that cut. Now, we have a nice flat spot on here. It's very rough though, so I need to make that a little bit smoother. And we'll do that over here on the edge sander. It's just going to go against the sandpaper like that. It's going to miss, I hope it'll miss that. Yeah, it should. We have a nice flat surface on there. We'll go back to the bandsaw. And now we need to flip the jig around to the angle side. It's set up exactly the same way. We're going to go close, but not quite touching. Now, you can see a stop on the jig right here. We're going to turn the portion that we just cut, and that's going to slide in and come up against that stop. Then we'll apply the pressure, and that's going to hold that in place. And then as you cut, you see this is going to go right down through here and take off a large chunk of this. Now, you can see the door the shape that we're looking for. All I have to do now is sand this off the same way we did the bottom. Doorstop. The big advantage of using the jig is it makes both of these cut surfaces parallel, which makes it much more effective when it's going under a door. It can actually be used either way. It could go this way or it could go this way. Some people like it this way because it puts the handle up a little higher, but it will work equally well either way. And that's all it takes to make your doorstop.